So my parents, their 41st wedding anniversary is coming up at the end of this month, and I could not think of a better gift, a more perfect gift than making them a custom cribbage board. And a lot of lessons learned on this one, and some mistakes were made, but the end result was pretty good, and I'm confident that they're really going to enjoy this. So follow along, and we'll walk through this together. The thing, I was originally going to make this thing out of black walnut, and unfortunately I just did not have a chunk of black walnut big enough to make this out of. So I started rummaging through all my offcuts and trying to find a good board that will support this. And I found some Osage orange, and this color combination was just not going to work for me. I had a very specific idea. I wanted to make sure it was walnut inlaid with maple, and then I had a whole bunch of other inlaid designs. So I had a big chunk of Clara walnut, and fortunately this stuff is too dry, and it wasn't going to work for this one. So I have a ton of strips of walnut, and in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, I do not want to do this. I'm going to have to cut all these individually and glue them up, but I think that was my only option as far as the materials that I had. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to join all these together, get a good block of walnut. My overall dimensions that it needed to be was 13 by 13. That way I can go through and start machining it. The biggest thing is I needed it to be 2 inches thick. And when I start machining on this and putting in the contour, the round contour on the top, I wanted to make sure everything was very dimensional and everything matched. So I spent a good portion of the morning just trying to match the grain as best as I could. I'm going to glue all of this together. I'm going to cut them into the smaller dimensions and glue those up just to give a kind of a better look as far as the end grain once I cut all this out. But this took a little bit. Need a lot of patience, and the biggest thing is I didn't want to have any voids, and sometimes when you join up boards, there's a good chance that you can actually get some pretty good voids in them. But the end result, I didn't have any voids. Everything was very crisp, but that's why you have a joiner, and making sure every edge is crisp, and then make sure that the glue is actually set properly. So as I'm processing all this wood, I'm thinking about the box design, and I want to do something pretty unique. I want to put some custom marquetry in, inlay some really nice veneer, and get a really nice mountain scene with a couple standing on a mountaintop overlooking a lake, and you can see the mountains in the distance. I have that old growth redwood, that curly redwood, and I want to definitely use that, but I'm just in the back of my mind, I want to make sure the color schemes are good, and I have a ton of excess curly maple that I'm going to try to do something kind of unique, but I was reminded very quickly just how painful it is to work softwood. And you're going to see some things when I start prepping the box later on that I had to take some necessary steps to make sure that the chip out was as minimum as possible. Hey, just a quick disclaimer. So my Frenchies will not leave my side. So if you guys hear some snoring or grunting and all that stuff, that is 100% my Frenchies that are sitting right next to me. The thing about when you put it into a CNC machine, you want to make sure everything is flat as possible. I was going to flatten everything in the CNC machine, and I just decided, I'll run it through the planer and the drum sander just to get a really good flat surface. And I was pretty accurate. I was pretty much dead on as far as the 2-inch requirement that I wanted. And this is probably the most critical step. This center point and this 0 that I'm going to go off of has to stay true throughout the entire build. And there's a couple things that you can do to make sure that happens. My center point I punched, and I knew that center point was going to stay throughout the entirety of this build. So I didn't put it in the video, but I went ahead and jointed a bunch of maple. This is a butcher block, and it has a really unique grain structure that when you put a finish on it, it's different and it looks good, and it almost turns gold. And it really did look good. And what I ended up doing with this inlay is I kept it kind of loose because I wanted to put a contour, and then I'm going to fill this with black epoxy. And I just want to have a nice seam that the epoxy can seep into, and then later on I'll put a contour. Now, later on in the video you're going to see this. My contour ended up being a huge pocket because I missed a critical dimension when I was doing my tool pass. But again, there's easy mistakes that you can make, and it's how you work around it. Can you save the piece or can't, or scrap it? I'm at the point where, you know, there was a lot of work that went into this one, and I went ahead and just made it work. So as I'm doing my engraving, I was going to put a contour around the walnut next to the letters and numbers. And it was only supposed to be about a 1/16 of an inch as far as width. And again, I fat fingered my tool path, and it just dove right into it, and it took the majority of that walnut out. Now this is a big mistake. This was not the original design, but I'm going to push forward and make sure that this actually looks good. And I'll fill it with black epoxy. It should give a pretty good effect. Now the thing about Osage orange, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly, you know, when it's finished and it has a nice finish on it, it looks amazing. It is absolutely terrible to work with. It is extremely hard. It's hard on the tools. There's yellow dust, gold dust everywhere. And it's very dense, but you know, if you can work through all of that, it pays off in the end, and it actually looks really good. And I ended up putting a bunch of Osage orange in the actual box, and did a bunch of inlays for the splines. And I just love how when it is finished, it just turns that goldish color. Now this file that I did in Fusion 360, I'm going to go ahead and put it online for free, and I'll put a link in the description to take you to it. Disclaimer, use at your own discretion. So this was a critical error that I made. I didn't have any silicone, and I wanted to make sure I had this barrier to keep the epoxy in, because, you know, that pocket is at an angle, and if you don't make a pocket deep enough to where the epoxy will sit, it will run out and it won't fill the actual pocket. Fortunately, since I didn't have any silicone, I had to use hot glue, and this made a freaking mess on my CNC machine. And heat with hot glue sticks, it does not work. And my bits got really gummed up. It cleared out, but it was a mess. And so it's all hard. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this in the CNC machine. I'm going to do a little bit of sanding just to see and make sure that, you know, I didn't get any air pockets. A lot of times it will crater depending on the depth, the epoxy that you use. But this actually turned out pretty well. I was really happy. The engraving with the Erickson and the name of the cribbage board, I ended up doing on my laser machine. And, it's really quick. And if the epoxy can seep into it, I mean, it gives a pretty good effect. The only thing I wasn't happy about was the color choice of that gray. It was a little too dark. But I'm going to push through, and it did look good in the end. But you can see all that hot glue that's stuck on the outside of that pocket. That went everywhere. And I am still picking glue out of my CNC machine. And I had to throw away a couple bits at the end of this. So the bottom lid is actually going really fast. It took me about 10 minutes to actually machine this out and get it finished and set into the bottom of the cribbage board. Not much goes into this stuff, and I ended up putting some magnets on the bottom so it would hold it, and actually really enjoyed how it looked. So with the box, I wanted to do something really special, and fortunately I was able to get this old growth redwood from Deadwood Sawmill. Austin, awesome guy. He has phenomenal pieces of wood at a decent price. I'll put a link in the description, and if you have time, check him out. Just save some wood for me. But again, this stuff is extremely soft, and my hope was I was going to back this with curly maple, and this was going to do two things. One, it was going to stabilize the redwood and just give me that extra strength so it doesn't bow and twist and do all this crazy stuff. I know if I didn't back it, it was going to do exactly that. And when it was time to square everything up, it was going to be a nightmare. The second thing is the inside of the box is going to be curly maple, and I'm actually going to machine a nice contour to go on the outside of the cribbage board, so it will actually sit in and will hold it into place. And it just makes everything a lot easier. But you got to do a little bit of prep work. You have to do all the measurements and really game plan how you're going to build that box around that cribbage board to make it make sense. So the overall dimension of the box, the width itself was going to be 3/4 of an inch. So it gave me 3/8 for the redwood, and it gave me 3/8 for the curly maple. And the drum sander is perfect to get as close as you can. And I mean, it's to a thousandth of an inch accuracy that you can get with the drum sander with that. It just makes it a lot easier. And again, if you haven't got a drum sander yet, if you want to do this type of stuff, drum sander is the way to go. Now, I mentioned it earlier that I was going to do some marquetry, and the cribbage board name is When Time Stood Still. That's the name of the cribbage board. And the perpetual calendar is frozen. It doesn't move on the date, that special date. It could be the wedding anniversary. It could be anything. And what I wanted to do on the marquetry was, try to capture that essence. And there's no better way than, looking at a sunset overlooking a lake into a mountain range. And I tried to replicate that the best I could, and I think, you know, at the end, it did actually turn out pretty well. It gave the effect that I wanted. Um, the darker woods in the foreground, you know, really kind of gives that depth of, you know, the mountain range behind it. So I think I mentioned this one of my other videos. I have a video that, you know, kind of did a step by step on how I do my marquetry. A lot of, you know, a lot of guys will hand cut these out, and that, I mean, it takes weeks to do that stuff. Me, I am 100%. I'm going to put it in a laser. When I design it, I'm already putting in the offsets for the curves, and when I put this together, you know, everything is extremely tight and form fitting, and you can do a lot of things a lot easier if you have a laser machine. And it's probably one of my best purchases that I made, other than the CNC machine. Another big thing when you're working with veneer is I put a lot of sanding sealer in, and does two things. One, it protects the veneer, and two, it kind of fills in those small little voids that are left behind. And when you start sanding veneer, you have to be extremely careful. It's very delicate. You can burn right through it, and it's just something that you got to really be mindful of. Now, this is one of the mistakes that I made, probably the second with that contour, but I didn't put any tape on the back of that redwood, and I noticed some significant chipping, and so I have to address that. And there's a couple ways you can do that. I ended up using a little bit bigger inlays than I really wanted to, but it's something that you have to account for, and you have to consistently plan for that. So there's a lot of machining on this box. I just went ahead and put the rabbets in, or the shoulders, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this in the CNC machine now, and I'm going to mill a really nice contour, a circle contour on each side of each one of these panels for the box. And this will have the cribbage board sit right in the middle, and it won't be able to move. It will follow that rounded shape. So everything is fitting pretty good. The model that I did in Fusion, it translated into real world, and you can't really ask for anything better than that. And you got to be really careful when you're sanding this, because you can take a lot of material out, and it won't look right. You know, it'll come off the machine, you know, the way it should be, and then it can go south on you pretty fast. But again, I'm just doing a quick test fit. I'm making sure that all the panels are good, sides of the boxes match, and the actual panel for the marquetry fits in correctly. And got lucky, everything fit perfectly. The cribbage board actually fit as far as the width and the depth of the actual board itself. And so I'm going to go ahead and glue this up. This is, again, it gets messy. And but that tape on the insides, that really saves you a lot of time, especially when you actually cut the box open, and there's no glue marks or anything on the seams where you glued. So I don't know what my deal is. Lately, I've been on this kick of if I do finger joints, I'm going to put splines in them to connect. And it does two things. It looks good, but it also kind of corrects, little small deficiencies within the actual finger joint. If you had chip out, you can go in there and you can remove that material and you can put a key in. And I think it's a really nice design feature. Let me know in the comments whether it is or not. Sometimes it can get really out of control. But again, I'm using tape just because of that chip out is so bad on the softwood. So I'm just getting everything kind of flush. I'm going to start cutting the curly maple inlays. And what I wanted to make sure these ran, from the top down to the sides, kind of like a bow tie. And it looks good, but there's a lot of work, specifically if you have multiple ones. And there's multiple different ways you can do this. You can do what I'm doing right now, or you can actually plan ahead and produce multiple inlays and glue them together before you actually inlay it into the board itself. That's probably the preferred way. I was just kind of experimenting just to see how I can get this the look the way I wanted it to. All right, so the first inlay is done. Now I'm going to go through and I'm going to put in the Osage orange. And we're almost to the final stretch on this stuff. This is the last one. I was going to put another one on the other side, and I just decided, I didn't have enough material, and it is what it is. It would have been nice to put it in there, but, at the end of the day, it still looked really good. All right, so again, I'm really noticing that bow, and there's going to be some things that I'm going to have to do to address that. Luckily, I still had a nice flush edge on the ends, and so I was able to get a very, clean cut trying to get this box open. To be a little bit more safe, I ended up just cutting it just a 16th short from actually going all the way through. And what I'll do is I'll follow up with a handsaw and just cut the box open from there. After that, the easiest thing to make sure that everything is flush as far as your tops and bottoms is to run it through your drum sander. That plane of the drum sander is just, it's going to keep that clean edge for you, and it will reflect for the bottom and the top halves of that box. And again, just making sure that the cribbage board actually fits, and it does. And so that's exciting. I wanted to make sure that, you know, the depth of the actual cribbage board kind of stuck out from the bottom. So when you open the lid, it's, you know, it's just being presented, and you know, so it was a good inch, you know, above the actual bottom of that box. And again, I love my drum sander. I cannot live without this thing. You know, I have hand planes, and I don't use them because the drum sander is, you know, it just does it for me. So what I ended up doing to address this bow, so I taped the box together, and I ended up using my table saw as, you know, my straight edge. So I ran my sander along that straight edge, and so I was able to remove the material that I wanted to correct that bow on each side. And so I was able to get everything re-flush, and I ended up sanding all the way up to 320. That's the most you really want to go with Rubio. And once I hit 320, I could really see, you know, the grain starting to pop. That curly, old growth redwood. I mean, it's phenomenal, and I started getting really excited once I started seeing that. So if my parents are watching, hey, so this thing is going to be in the mail. It's going to be delivered probably at the end of this week. So just keep your eyes out. Surprise. No, I love you guys. And I was, you know, honored that I could actually make something like this for you. And I hope that you guys enjoy it. I know you're huge cribbage players. And, you know, right now, you know, these are the things that are going to keep your mind, you know, at ease, you know, with everything that's going on. So I love you guys, and yeah, let me know what you think. All right, so this is the end of the video. If you made it this far, awesome. If you're new to this channel, please like and subscribe. All that stuff matters for my channel. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next video. Appreciate it, guys.